To the true heroes who sacrificed for freedom, and faced the most dangerous war in history. The Ghegzther List presents, the historical story of the Battle of Yultong. The story of 1,000 Filipino soldiers who defeated 40,000 Chinese soldiers during the Korean War. How did 1,000 Filipino soldiers defeat 40,000 Chinese soldiers? That's what we will find out here in the Ghegzther List. Before we start our video, please subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell for more updates. On 25th of June 1950, North Korea shocked the South Korea with its sudden attack on their border in Seoul. South Korea did almost nothing in the attack, because 75,000 North Korean troops invaded their area. Due to the size and strength of North Korea's forces, South Korea retreated from the battle, and North Korea eventually occupied the city of Seoul. Due to the weakness of military force of South Korea, their government asked for help from the American nation. So America immediately sent troops to help South Korea to regain their city. But America and South Korea still didn't win the battle against North Korea because of China's help. So the American forces temporarily withdrew from the battle. America asked for help from United Nations to encourage allied country to send military forces to fight North Korea and China. The Philippines is one of South Korea's allied countries that has received assistance from the United Nations. And it was under the leadership of President Elpidio Quirino. The Philippines was slowly recovering because World War II had just ended at that time. But even though the Philippines has not yet recovered, but Elpidio Quirino still gave support to the allied country. The Philippines was the first country to respond to the United Nations to provide support to South Korea. So the Congress immediately passed Republic Act 573, or better known as the Philippine Military Nations Act. So Elpidio Quirino immediately sent 5 battalion combat teams consisting 7,420 troops. The good thing about this battalion is that they were not chosen by President Quirino, they volunteered to come along to defend South Korea. They are all willing to help even if they are not fighting for their own country, and call to them as Philippine Expeditionary Forces to Korea. On September 16, 1950, the 10th Battalion sailed for 3 days to South Korea, the 10th Battalion team being expertly trained in the use of war tanks. They consisted of 1,400 officers and men. On September 19, 1950, the 10th Battalion team first arrived in Busan, South Korea, led by Colonel Mariano Azurin. When they arrived in Busan, they immediately felt the cold climate. As they walked, they saw Koreans almost on the road living and begging. And the houses there were almost destroyed because of the war. Koreans are almost hungry, weak, and crying because of the incident. So when the Koreans saw the Filipino soldiers, they almost ran to them, to ask for food and beg for help. So the Filipino soldiers did not hesitate to share the food they brought. Because they saw their miserable condition, they remembered their experience in the war against the Japanese. So they promised the Koreans that they would do everything to defend their country, even though they knew their lives depended on the battle. The 10th Battalion found that North Korea had already occupied nearly 80% of the area, and only 20% remains and is guarded by UN forces, led by the Americans. The 10th Battalion team arrived in South Korea without a tank, as the Americans said they would provide it for their use. But the American tanks were destroyed when the North Koreans attacked them, so they only had 1 tank left to be lent to the Filipino soldiers. A few weeks ago, the combat team trained and studied the areas and weapons they would use, and how they would strategize. After their training, from Busan, the Filipino 10th Battalion team was immediately sent to Sariwan, North Korea. On November 11, 1950, the Filipino 10th Battalion decided to patrol with the Americans from Myeongdong to Sing, and it was led by Filipino officer Colonel Max Young. While they were patrolling, they did not know that a North Korean's base was only a few kilometers away. When they were turning on the mountain, the North Koreans shot at them, and the Filipino soldier was surprised. So they fell down and hid, so that they would not be hit by enemy bullets. But at that time, Colonel Max Young was riding in a war tank, and looking through the telescope what was happening to his comrade. And he saw his soldiers were terrified and almost motionless. What Colonel Max Young did, was turn the tank up, and there he saw the North Koreans shooting. The next thing he did was pull out his machine gun, and shoot the North Korean soldiers. Due to the force of the machine gun, the North Koreans were scared and ran away, so Colonel Max Young fired even more bullets at the North Koreans. When Colonel Max Young's fellow soldiers saw what he was doing, they slowly got up and attacked to fire bullets. After 30 minutes of fighting, the opponent was retreated. Filipino soldiers inspected the area, and found that 42 North Korean soldiers had died in the fighting, while Filipino soldiers only one of them had been wounded. In that event, they had already occupied the enemy base, and this was their first win against the North Koreans. The American soldiers were also happy with the courage shown by Colonel Max Young, so they were nicknamed the Fighting Filipinos. On the night of April 22, 1951, on the northern side of Yongchon, the Filipino 10th Battalion team was part of the American 3rd Infantry Division, was attacked by a strong force from China and North Korea, that called the Great Spring Offensive. It is the largest offensive by the Chinese and by Communist North Korea. The Filipino 10th Battalion faced more than 40,000 soldiers from the Chinese division. At 12 o'clock in the evening, the Chinese began attacking 1,000 Filipino soldiers using powerful artillery pieces. But they struggled because of the intense defense made by the 10th Battalion team, which used powerful tanks and artillery. However, a large Chinese force invaded the east side, where the battalion team from Turkey was pushed back, and other Chinese forces focused on the central part where the UN forces are. And they attacked some small parts guarded by the Puerto Ricans, but with the volume and force by Chinese, the Puerto Ricans also retreated and they left their post there. Because of what happened, their situation was very bad, so the Chinese eventually entered their area and surrounded the 10th Battalion team. And as the Chinese approached their base, there was a platoon of Filipinos stationed before arriving at the fort, and waiting for the Chinese soldiers approaching their fort. The 1,000 Filipino soldiers barely budged and decided not to leave their ground. They used weapons, grenades and hand-to-hand combat for enemies approaching them. 40,000 Chinese surrounded them, but 1,000 Filipino soldiers stood firm without retreating, and it was led by Lieutenant Arciaga. While they were fighting, it gave enough time for Captain Conrado Yap to make a counterattack. Due to the counterattack, it saved the Filipino soldiers who were trapped in the battle, and the Chinese soldiers retreated a bit. At 4 in the morning they made a second counterattack using the tanks, so that the Chinese force was completely retreated. The battle lasted until noon, until the Chinese retreated completely. In the event, that 15 Filipinos were killed, 26 were injured and 14 were missing. While the death toll among the Chinese was 500. And in the following days the Chinese and North Koreans continued to lose the battle, so they called for a ceasefire. As a result, South Korea regained their home country from the enemy. Because of that incident the Korean paid tribute to the brave soldiers, and made them a wall memorial where the names of the brave soldiers who fought in history are written. If you liked our story, don't forget to like, comment, and share our video. And if you want to feature a story or anything on my channel, just email ghegztherlist30@gmail.com. And please don't forget to subscribe my channel and hit the notification bell for more updates. Thank you for watching.